So you guys know how I told you happened with Myron. Like, I think the biggest part of the problem was the obsessive kind of um stalkerish kind of behavior. So last year when we dated, the first thing that happened, and the person who said it wasn't going to work there, my ex, they were totally right because he did the same thing the second time. Like the first time we dated, he was like, every time I went up, it was winter time and he didn't have a winter coat. So he couldn't come outside with me when I would go smoke, which would have only satisfied him. It wouldn't have mattered to me either way. But like when I was at his house, at the group house that he was living in, every time I would get up to go smoke, he would say something like, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to spend time with you. You have to go smoke." But, if he had said it once and it was like a sweet nothing or some shit, it would have been kind of cute. But every time I had to smoke, he would say it like kind of possessive and controlling, like he was whining that I wasn't by his side every single second. And I had been at his house for like 7 hours at that point, and we weren't doing anything. Like he didn't want to watch movies, he didn't want to watch TV, and he didn't want to talk. So we were just sitting in his dark bedroom, just sitting there for like hours and hours. So I was just smoking a lot. And I was bored. And like I would ask, can we put on music or do you want to listen to music? And he'd be like, no. Do you want to watch a movie? No, not really. And he wasn't talking because he's not good at conversation. So I was just really bored out of my skull and was just trying to humor him by being there as long as I was. So that was the first kind of red flag. And that was the main reason why I broke up with him, because he kept saying it over and over and over. And I felt like he was being kind of controlling and possessive, and it was rubbing me the wrong way. So we dated for only like a week the first time around. And then the second time, when he was being really supportive through my really bad depression and was helping me out with money and seemed like he was being a really solid friend, I was like, well, maybe I'll give him a second chance. But we only ended up dating for like 4 times this past like 2 weeks ago, or like week and a half ago, or whatever, however long it's been since we just recently broke up. But like I said before, with the whole calling 7 times in the span of 30 minutes, and like when I was on the walk, and like when I first started the walk, before I even left the house, were on the phone. I was like, I'm getting ready to go walk to the dollar store. It was lightly raining, so I took my umbrella. When I like 10 minutes into the walk, he called, was like, do you want someone to talk to you while you're on your walk? I was like, no, I'd rather listen to music. It's a long walk. So I got to the dollar store. He called again. I was like, I'm about to do my shopping. I'll call you when I get out. I called him again. I was like, I'm about to walk home. I'll call you when I get back to the house. 10 minutes later, he calls. You want someone to talk to you while you're on your walk? I'm like, no, I just said I wanted to listen to my music. I'm 15 minutes away from home. I'll call you when I get home. And then he called me 4 more times in the span of that 15 minutes. And it felt really obsessive. So like it made me so uncomfortable. It was a little like not scared, but like just uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. So like that was one thing, and I had described that a little bit better in the last video, but like there was that, and then like the blowing up the phone all throughout the day and texting all throughout the day, and like not being capable of not having me there every single second, every single day for like the duration of the time that we dated. It was like a week that we dated, week and a half or something like that the second time around. And the whole time he was like hyper clingy, hyper this and this. And then what really occurred to me when he was like, yeah, I have some mental handicaps, that's why I act the way I do. And I'm like, no one with a mental handicap would have been able to reason that out. If you were mentally slow, you never would have been able to say, I'm mentally slow, that's the reason I act so obsessive. They never would have had the mental capacity to put those two things together in a sentence. And it didn't occur to me until like 2 weeks later that he wouldn't have been able to register that if that was really the reason why he was acting that way. So it was another red flag to me, and I was like, wait a minute, you wouldn't know that if you were slow. And I know that because it's common sense, but also because I have two severely mentally handicapped cousins, and while they can hold down lightweight jobs, like they shred paper at their jobs, and that's all they do at their job is just shred a bunch of paper. So it's like really easy. They can't get their fingers in the paper shredder. Like they just put paper in the paper shredder and they get paid. And then they get picked up from work and they get dropped off to work, and that's all they do. So they make a little bit of money and they can get what they want. And they live with their parents, my uncle and his wife. So they have a very simple life. They can't live on their own. They can't cook. stuff like that. But like they can do basic communication. One of them is borderline mute. He barely talks. The other one, he's also borderline mute. He never talks. But they can do basic communication words. They don't know how to read and write. They can't drive. Like they're really mentally handicapped. But they would never be able to be like when they get crushes on girls, they're hyper sweet. Like they're very sweet. They're adorable. Like they blush a lot and they're really shy and docile. And they follow you around like a little lovesick puppy and they hang on to every word you say. But there's nothing about them that would be like, I'm gonna call her 20 times in a row, because like for one thing they don't know how to use a phone, but like even if they had the opportunity to, like they wouldn't be hyper obsessive, and they wouldn't be able to say I'm blowing up your phone so much because like I'm super in love with you. Like they wouldn't even know, even if they did blow your phone up, they wouldn't know why they were blowing your phone up. Like they wouldn't be able to articulate that. So I know if Myron's handicap were that bad, he wouldn't be able to tell me that. So I was like, okay, but I'm saying all this to say what just happened. Why the title of this video said I had to block him, because like day before yesterday, he texted me out of nowhere. Like we hadn't said anything. I think we had a couple words exchanged that day where he was like early in the morning when he went to his groups. He was like, hey, how you doing? And I was like, hey, how are you? I'm good. And he was like, I'm good. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm at groups. So I was like, he was like, what are you doing? I said, I'm up at the other group house chilling with a few people. And that was as much as we spoke. And then I texted him later and I was like, hey. And then like 3 hours later, maybe like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he texted me and he was like, I can't talk to you right now. Like, I'm still really hurt about the fact that we broke up and I can't be around you right now. I need time to process what just happened and I'm really upset about everything. So goodbye. And I was like, all right. And that's just what I texted. I was like, all right. And then the next day he texted me. He was like, listen, Micah, I'm really going through some heavy things right now and I just need a friend to talk to. And so I need to talk to you and can we talk? And I was like, listen, you're really out of control of your emotions. I was like, you can't just toss me aside. Like one moment you think we can be friends and the next moment I'm someone that you don't want to talk to, so you don't feel you have to. It's like I have emotions and feelings too. You can't just toss me aside when your emotions get too strong and you can't handle being around me, and then the next day you want to be friends because you're going through emotional stuff. I said if I had needed you yesterday and I had needed to talk to you, you wouldn't have been available to me because you were in your own crisis. But now that you're in your own crisis again, you think I'm supposed to just be there for you. It's like, it doesn't work that way. And I was like, you're borderline obsessed. I said, I think what you consider love is obsession and infatuation. I was like, you're not actually in love with me. And I just described some of his behavior. It was like, you spent your daughter's 18th birthday money on me, went into crisis, got suicidal, had to be taken to the hospital, and I didn't know it was her birthday money until after the fact. I was like, some of the other stuff he did in regards to me, it was like, that's not love, that's infatuation and obsession. It was like, some of the stuff you do, it's just so extreme that I don't think it's your mental health. I don't think it's your mental slowness or mental inabilities. I think it's your obsession and your stalker like behavior. It's like, and it makes me very uncomfortable. It's like, I don't think you have the capacity to be a decent friend. I just don't think you have the capacity to be friends with me. I don't think you have balanced emotions when it comes to me. I don't think you ever did. And I don't think we need to remain in a relationship with each other. So goodbye. And I just blocked his number because I'm like, he's so out of control. Like, he's always been that way. So like he said when he first saw me at the group home here, when I was living here at the group home and had to go to psychosocial rehab rather than just coming up here for fun, he was like, as soon as I first saw you, I was like, oh my God, I really, really like her. And I was like, I've asked him multiple times, like, why? Was it some sort of love at first sight? Or was it some sort of infatuation? Was it the way I looked? Was it how I carried myself? And he can't really articulate what it was or why it was. But ever since the first day, like, he would come up there every single day just to see me, and I didn't even know he was doing that back at the time. I just saw him around the house every day, and I thought that was just another patient that was just at the house. I didn't know he wasn't in the program. He wasn't part of the group home. He was at a whole nother building on site, another house. He was not in GRI. He was not court ordered to be there. He was just living there. And he was coming up there every day to see me. So gradually he weeded his way in, would come sit out with me at the awning type thing at the group house while I would smoke. And so, like, that's another thing. Like, when I would smoke all the time, he knew I was out there. It would be me and a group of the dudes that was up at the house and a couple of the girls, and all of us would hang out and we made friends. That's how I met Ruby and everybody like that, and Ian, one of my ex-boyfriends, and all these people. And that's how me and Myron eventually, like, started hanging out. But I found him super draining of my energy back then, and I was like, I would get so irritated and tired in my spirit when he would be around. And I remember that's why I didn't like hanging out with him, because I would physically get tired whenever he would come around. Like, as soon as he walked in, my energy would drain out of me, and I was like, something off about that dude. And with time, the energy crisis like dissipated. But when we were dating last week, like, it started to come back, and it was like headaches that I would get, and like body drag and all this shit. And I'm just kind of over it at this point, where I'm like, it's just nothing positive coming out of this experience. I'm like, if you're gonna talk about how much you care about your daughters, he's a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, and he's 40 years old, and I'm 34. And I'm like, so if you're like, he did it again. That's what I wanted to say. He did it again with the money thing. Like, as soon as we started dating again, he started giving me every single penny he made. And he is like, I want to save up money, $1,000 to give to my in-laws, because they're the ones raising his kids. And he is like, I want to give $1,000 to my in-laws, so my 15-year-old, when she turns 16, she can get $1,000 towards her car, because they told me whatever I can do to put towards the car would be helpful, because even though his in-laws are crazy rich and they can and have bought them, the 18-year-old, her car, a brand new car, and they were going to do that for the 15-year-old when she turned 16, like, they would still wanted Myron to do something for his daughters, because like, he's been at the group home for 11 years with no job. He literally sits on the couch and stares at the TV with nothing on the TV for hours and hours, day after day after day, talking on the phone with me, talking about, I'm bored. I'm like, why don't you do something with your life? And I always thought he was like one of the most unmotivated men I've ever met in my life. I'm like, how are you going to be in a group home for 11 years and you haven't had a single job? You don't have a car. You don't give any money to your kids. You don't visit your kids. They have to come visit you. I'm like, you're not making any effort to get on any medicine that works a little better so you can get a job. You're not advocating for yourself. You're talking crazy. You're skipping your meds so hard that they took you out of the house you've been living at for 11 years and set you back into another place that you hate, because there's a lot of drug usage and staff can't communicate well, and you feel stifled so much that you're running over to my house every 3 seconds, and I'm feeling stifled because you're acting like a stalker. And I'm like, he's so unhealthy, and his emotions are all over the place. And I think he has an unhealthy obsession with me based on the way I look, is how it must have started. And I'm like, okay, so you formed some infatuation based off of how I look. Found out that I'm really kind, I'm really open, I'm really patient, I'm really caring, I'm really generous, and may have developed some feelings of love, but you have no ability to do that healthily. So I had to cut contact with him, and I'm like, I'm going to keep it that way this time. So yeah, they're your ex for a reason, and that person was definitely right about that. I just didn't see it at the time because I thought he had wonderful traits, but I'm like, you can't say I'm slow and that's the reason I act the way I act. Like, nobody's gonna be able, no slow person would be able to say that. So I think that was just another excuse he used, and it kind of felt like it when he said it, but I kind of brushed it to the side because I was like, okay, so that would explain a lot of things, and it still kind of does if he is kind of slow, because I do think he's slow, but I don't think that's something he would have been able to articulate as the reason why he acts the way he does, because I don't know any slow person that's obsessive. like, and who can tell you that's the reason why they're doing it. They would have no idea. They wouldn't even be able to or willing to acknowledge that that's why they're doing. Not even willing. They wouldn't be able to, because I know there's a girl at the psych ward named Delita, who's really mentally handicapped, like my cousins, who gets obsessive about girls who have bigger butts than she does, or bigger, better shape than she does, or smaller than she is, stuff like that, who will try to fight the girls, and she really will hone in and get hyper obsessed about them. But she's so slow, she wouldn't know how to say, I'm mad that that girl looks better than me. Like, she has a lot of jealousy, but yeah, she has a lot of jealousy, but like, she wouldn't be able to articulate what she was feeling. So I don't think Myron would either. So I kind of had to set that record straight for him, and maybe he can see it a little bit clearer now. I don't know, but it went south. So just wanted to do this quick update. So I love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.